When an adult wears diapers in a TV show or movie, it's meant to signal one of three things. One is that they've lost their dignity, either because their health is deteriorating or because someone's forced them to play the part of a baby. In the 2005 comedy thriller Bad Girls from Valley High, a curse makes 3 hot teen girls start to rapidly age, forcing them to wear diapers to cope. And in one episode of The Simpsons, the alcoholic putz Barney is seen handing out flyers for a baby furniture store in a diaper and baby bonnet. A passerby actually tells him, "You sicken me," before his diaper falls off and blows away. He chases it and then turns the corner to see his own mother. Pop culture teaches us that wearing a diaper as an adult is the ultimate humiliation. Another reason characters might wear a diaper is for deception. There are countless cartoons where the villain dresses up as a baby in order to get pity from the hero, usually resulting in their own loss of dignity when they're pampered and coddled like a baby against their will. In the Jetsons, it's a jewel thief. In Looney Tunes, it's a tiny bank robber. In the 2008 Batman animated series, it's crime boss Babyface trying to bust out of jail. According to pop culture, dressing as a baby is a great way to fool people into being nice to you. The final major reason a grown adult might wear diapers in TV and film is that their mental health is suffering. In SpongeBob SquarePants, the ornery Squidward gets hit in the head and regresses to a baby-like state as a result. In Rugrats, Tommy's dad Stu falls off the roof and does the exact same thing. Again, pop culture is there to let us know that adults who want to be babies have mental health issues. But there's a large, diverse group of adults who like to dress up in diapers, who are mentally sound, aren't trying to deceive anybody, and don't consider diapers humiliation. Or do, and like it that way. And today, we're going to find out why diapers are appealing to them, the many different desires and expressions within this community, and how a diaper is sometimes just a leather collar in a different form. I'm Ashley Hamer, and this is Taboo Science, the podcast that answers the questions you're not allowed to ask. So, to get some basics out of the way, the name of this community of people who like wearing diapers is an acronym, ABDL, Adult Babies and Diaper Lovers, sometimes written as Adult Babies/Diaper Lovers.
ABDL is a diverse community of adults who enjoy wearing diapers and or role-playing as babies. On the DL end of things, it is often sexual.
That is, for people who are more in it for the diapers themselves, it's usually because they get sexual gratification from some aspect or aspects of wearing, feeling, seeing, and even hearing the crinkle of a diaper.
On the AB end of things, there it becomes a little less like what your listeners might imagine. They enjoy dressing as babies and role-playing as babies. This might involve pacifiers, stuffed animals, etc. Now, interestingly, they may separate conventional sexuality from AB play. They also might embrace the role or enjoy the humiliation and loss of control.
That is B. Terrance Grey, an amateur researcher and the creator of the incredible ABDL resource understandinginfantilism.org, which has been going strong for nearly 30 years. Grey performed some of the first demographic studies of the ABDL community through his own web surveys and has published in several academic journals. And as Grey said, this community is diverse. It's not like there are adult babies and diaper lovers and that's it.
They're often discussed as two ends to a spectrum, but it is a continuum. The mode for the community is actually to be mostly DL.
Interesting. So what you mean by that is on that continuum, everyone's pretty much into diapers, but not as many are into the age play part?
Well, most are into diapers. Some aren't into the age play.
ABDL is that term that you search. It's this term you see. And it's interesting because a lot of people don't identify that way anymore. I remember when I first got into the ABDL community, it was a thing that you had to identify. Either you were an adult baby or you were a diaper lover, and there really wasn't other options. Nowadays, we have relationships like DDLG, which is Daddy Dom Little Girl, or CGL, which is Caregiver Little. And you see a lot more people identify as littles or bigs or caregivers these days.
Yep.
Oh, for the reference, I identify as a little.
Me too.
That is Sophie and Chloe, co-hosts of the podcast The Usual Bet, an 18 and up age play podcast that focuses on ABDL topics. The name refers to the bet the co-hosts make during every episode. Whoever loses has to wear a diaper on the next episode. One reason that many people in the ABDL community don't use the term adult baby is because not all identify with a baby-type character. Some roleplay is slightly older, toddlers, or even primary school kids. Rather than littles, people with that older identity sometimes call themselves middles. Which brings me to the first question you might be asking. Is this a pedophile thing? As you might imagine, that is a question people in the ABDL community are used to and very ready to answer.
This is like age play 101. First thing you got to talk about, first thing you deal with. Age play, kink, ABDL stuff is 18 plus.
Yeah, adults only, no minors.
We are adults. We consent to the things that we are doing. We are playing with this concept of being younger and fitting in this space, and we have to follow specific rules with consent that go along with that. Is with any kink, you need to set boundaries, you need to set your limits. You have to be responsible for your own actions. And that's not something you can unilaterally depend on with a minor because they can't consent to these things. We have zero interaction with minors, and I think like it's one of those things that the ABDL community is extremely vigilant about because of
realistically hyper-vigilant.
Yeah, and the way that the public perception is always associated these two things together, we do so much to do our best to draw these lines very, very firmly that this is not an acceptable side of this.
Absolutely. I also think it's important to note, like, the attraction stuff. It is not two childish things. It's about being put in the position of, like, a childish situation of, like, having limits put on you or constraints or things that take away your autonomy. It's BDSM. It's like a power play, give and take. It is not, oh, I find childish things attractive or something. It's, oh, I am embarrassed to have been put in this situation. I have lost power by being put in this situation. And I think that's where you go back into that traditional, like, dom sub power play stuff, and that's where a lot of the sexual aspects are.
A majority of age play in ABTL is just kink with a really cutesy filter over it.
Yeah.
That's really what you're playing with.
This isn't true for everyone in the ABDL community. Not everyone gets off on humiliation or anything you'd find in BDSM. There are as many ways to be in the ABDL community as there are people, and how it looks in one person's life or bedroom may be completely different from someone else's. ABDL also lends itself to a lot of different kinks. Looking at you, furries. So the limit is truly your imagination. But for some people, the humiliation and shame of being an adult wearing a diaper is a real turn-on.
One aspect for a lot of people, and myself included, can be that this is relatively embarrassing, right? Anything having to do with, like, bodily needs, and especially bathroom-related needs, is something most adults, and I'm certainly one of them, find embarrassing to interact with other people about, or even just with ourselves.
That is Benny, who's a member of the board of directors for an event called Twisted Tryst, which is a sort of summer camp for kinksters, and a former manager at the Chicago BDSM club Galleria Domain 2. He also identifies as a little.
But then when we kind of push past that humiliation aspect, it can be, like, deeply connecting between people. So when I get a chance to play with this with other people, the experience of changing someone else's diaper, somebody changing mine, sort of interacting with that on an ongoing basis feels really intimate in a way that can be, like, a little bit invasive, a little bit caretaking, or a lot caretaking. All of those different emotional aspects are important to me.
It's comforting. It's cute. I like being cute. It is a great coping mechanism for, like, stress or anxiety or all those things. It's a way to take a step back from the toils and stress of daily life and like enter into a safe, comfortable space. I think all of kink offers that in its own way, and this is a very straightforward way in my opinion.
I think like age play and ABDL is a very cutesy way of stepping into that space where a lot of other kinks, focus on other elements of submission and stuff. Age play still does that in a lot of regards. You still have to be dependent on someone or like fall into the submissive category, this role where you aren't in charge of things, and it's very freeing to let someone else have control or, be in situations where even you can kind of baby yourself a little bit sometimes too, where
go easy on yourself.
You set up a situation where you don't have control over that, or you can get through difficult things a lot easier.
But what about diapers themselves? They're big, they're awkward, they get heavy when they're wet, they make a sound when they move, they make people walk funny. What of that could possibly be appealing? Well, for a certain person, all of the above.
I like a lot of the physical sensations associated. So I really like plastic-backed disposable diapers as my preference. The smooth plastic under my fingers is really good. The sensation of like thickness and warmness, and if you're wearing a really good quality diaper, you kind of can't forget that it's there. Right? Like it's a little bit of like a constant reminder of something going on with your body. And then the joke I often make, but it's true, is that I think most people like the idea of something warm, wet, and squishy around their genitals, right? Like that, just from a purely sort of physical perspective, that can do it for some people, and I guess I'm one of those people.
Diapers are really core to this kink, foundational for this kink, and both Chloe and I are into this aspect of this kink.
I think I'd equate it, if I can equate it to a different kink, it's kind of like a collar, right? Like functionally in terms of what it does in terms of the power dynamic and all that.
Yes, you're wearing this because this shows your status. It puts you into this position, this lower submissive position.
Yep.
On top of that, for some people, or even just some of the time, diapers are just comfortable.
Yep.
They're nice, they're comforting, they bring a sense of just peace to it.
Childishness.
Yeah, it's kind of like going to bed in your favorite pajamas, There's just this serenity to them sometimes that, for whatever reason, really vibes with me and with other people in the community.
But diapers were meant for babies who can't control their own bodily functions. Like, when you change a diaper, it's because it's full of pee or poop. Do adults in this community use them that way too? Well, not all, but most do.
Most people pee and most people don't. We use the word mess instead of poop. Not everybody does, but that's the most common. People will say peeing and messing. Messing is less common, but certainly not uncommon, and is less common but not uncommon to wear but not use. So the overlap between water sports, playing with urine, and playing with diapers is pretty high.
Next question, do people have sex in the diapers?
Yes, people definitely have sex in the diapers. It can be a little bit complicated. So if you put a hole in a disposable diaper, you are wrecking the integrity of what is holding everything together, right? So people have done some very creative things to try to make that less of a disaster, or you just lean into the mess and be like, this is going to make a mess. That's also fine too. There's lots of hand stuff for a lot of people, because getting hands or toys or vibrators or whatever inside of diapers. Strap-ons go outside them really nice. There's a huge variety of ways to do it. If you can think of a way to make it work, someone has done that. But yeah, people definitely have sex in diapers. There's also, I think slightly more common, is sex or sexual play as a part of a diaper change. So the diaper's coming off for a reason that makes sense in context. And then we're going to like do some kind of sexual play as a part of that process, and then often then put another diaper on. That's a pretty common one because of the context just sort of makes sense there for people.
Diapers aren't the only piece of gear many people in this community wear to get into that babyish headspace. In fact, to this outsider, ABDL may be the kink with the most and most ornate supplies and gear that I've ever come across. You don't have to have all or even any of this stuff to participate in ABDL, but for someone who has the budget, the sky is the limit for what you could buy.
Yeah, I would say pacifiers are probably the second thing people buy. People go for diapers first and pacifiers second, generally. I mean, lots of variation, but there are a huge number of pacifiers available out there now too. They got inexpensive to produce, and so there's a wide variety, lots of different designs, lots of solid colors.
More common items include pacifiers, bottles, nursing bottles, and stuffed animals.
And sippy cups and bottles and all of those kinds of things as well are available and being sold. And people will make and sell like cute rattles and, you know, baby blankets styled like baby ones, but that are bigger. Just kind of everything you can think of.
Clothing is also commonly present. It would be affected by individual tastes, of course.
Some people just want the diapers and they wear their adult clothing and they're just the diaper lover side of it, or kind of minimalist. Others want a whole wardrobe of cute pajamas and onesies and rompers and dresses and all of that kind of stuff. Onesies in particular, and by onesies, I specifically mean like a shirt that snaps at the crotch. I know people use that word to mean lots of different kinds of products, sleepers with feet and whatever, but like specifically, I mean the ones that snap at the crotch. Those tend to be particularly popular because they help hold diapers in place. So they're like a functional thing as well as being adorable.
Now, one notable item is sissy clothing, and that's something we should be aware of because depending on the individual, they may dress as a very girlish baby as a way to express their identification as a girlish baby, and others on the other end of the AB subspectrum might enjoy being dressed as a very girlish baby to amplify the humiliation of being not only a baby, but a girl.
There are boy babies too, of course.
For my little self, he can really lean into boy-coded colors and boy-coded, you know, stuff. And so for me, that means leaning into having a lot of blue in his wardrobe, things like that. And then a really strong attraction to boy characters in media. So I like Sesame Street a lot. Bert's my favorite character, that sort of thing, right? And when I see other people playing in a more masculine space in the ABDL sense, and there are many, it's not unusual, it does tend to be those sorts of things. It tends to be leaning into, you know, bright colors that focus a little bit more on blue, characters that they identify as being more male-coded, and there are luckily lots of products. You know, there are some companies that are doing a really good job of making sure that they've got gender diverse kinds of products available, diapers and clothing and stuff like that.
And then, if you got a sky-high budget,
they may even have custom furniture. Custom furniture is quite expensive and difficult to source. It also requires sufficient space to have a room with the custom furniture. So it's quite rare, but many ABDL individuals would like to have a custom nursery with their custom furniture and a layout that might extend to quite a large range of items.
So how does a person start doing this kind of thing? Is it from childhood? Is it something you get into when a partner introduces it to you? As with most things ABDL, the desire can be planted in all sorts of ways.
Some may have a lifelong desire. They can't tell you when it started, but they would have either realized it at some point or just accepted that it was always there, seemingly. Others may have been, as adults, introduced to a practice and found that they enjoyed it. Now, these two groups would initially have separate demographics. The first group, which has a paraphilia or a predisposition, if it's not sexual, they do tend to be male. They do tend to have early ages of onset. They also tend to be white and in the Western culture. However, that might be strictly a cultural thing. The second group that may have simply experimented and found that they enjoyed, those, in contrast, tend to be more women. this too might be a strictly cultural thing. At department stores, back when there were department stores, you would be able to get footed sleepers in infant sizes and women's sizes, but not men's sizes. In so many other ways, society tells women that it might be okay to be a princess as an adult, then they would a male.
In fact, a common belief about the ABDL community is that it's nearly all men. That's something that seems to be changing. More women, both cis and trans, are joining the community. That doesn't mean that women weren't into this historically. Instead, it could be a sign of changing social dynamics. As Benny told me, ABDL internet forums used to be toxic places for women, and the community is gradually learning to treat them better. It's the story of a lot of online spaces for women. It just seems like ABDL got the memo a little later. But either way, according to research, men are more likely to get into diapers and other ABDL proclivities early in life, while women are more likely to discover it later. But even for those who get into it early, results from Gray's original survey suggest it's probably not from birth.
The particular type of diaper that an ABDL individual fantasizes about will lag by about 5 years relative to the type of diaper that they may have been raised in.
Lag? What do you mean?
The type of diaper that an ABDL might fantasize about would be the type of diaper that a younger person, 5 years younger on average, would have been raised in. This suggests a postnatal formative component. This doesn't mean that the desires were necessarily caused at an average of 5 years of age, but that there is maybe some later stage that occurs there.
Got it. So say that possibly if they were 5 and saw babies wearing those diapers, that's the diaper they thought about. They didn't think about the diaper that they themselves had on.
Potentially.
Okay.
It is rare for adults to be able to remember their own infancy.
Right.
So they may be reconstructing their own childhood.
Yeah.
From what they observe in the community. Now, this is one aspect that makes the ABDL community interesting scientifically, because they do have that clear postnatal component. With other orientations and paraphilias, they could arguably mainly genetic or prenatal.
This is super cool. I mean, most kinks don't involve any specific objects from that far back in a person's life. So ABDL is unique in that scientists can potentially point to something, in this case, a specific type of diaper, that gives some hint as to when the interest started. For Sophie and Chloe, they both felt like a desire to be a little had always been with them. Here's Sophie.
Even before I was 10 years old, I remember wanting to always be the baby when we play house. I remember having a little brother who is significantly younger than me and was in diapers, and I would be jealous of that. I remember being jealous. I remember having my younger sister's toys and wanting to play with them and stuff. So I think I've always been into this. It didn't really come about to being oh, this is a thing, this is a thing other people are into. Until I was maybe 13 or 14, and I was just talking to friends my age on the internet, because that's how the internet was back then. And it kind of grew into I want to role play online as kind of being younger, or being treated like a 5-year-old, and it just kind of developed from there. And I didn't really learn about the ABTL community or this kind of bigger picture until maybe my mid-teens, and then I did my best not to engage with it because no minors in kink. We always make jokes of oh yeah, we were into baby stuff, but when we were 18 and no younger. But that's not inherently true. It's just us trying to draw that fine line. I do think this is something it's always been a part of me. It took a long time to accept that, and it took me even longer to appreciate and love that part of me.
Honestly, I have pretty much the same story. Impulses at an early age, wanting to be this way, not understanding myself, a lot of self-hatred and shame that went along with that, and taking the greater part of my adolescence to understand this and start to accept it before reaching 18 and no younger, and joining the community.
For Benny, the discovery came later, but it fit like a puzzle piece into things he was already doing.
Playing with age aspect of it goes back to sort of my earliest understandings of relationships and sexuality. So even as an adolescent, I was sort of experimenting with those ideas. But in my early adulthood, as I came into the kink community, I discovered that diaper fetishes were a thing. And something about that really jumped out for me. So some people find this out about themselves quite a bit younger. But for me, it was in my very early adulthood. So I sort of got exposed to that idea and was just immediately fascinated and felt like it connected quite strongly with the play that I was already doing that had to do with vulnerability and youth and intimacy in slightly humiliating ways. Aspects of that really kind of all resonated. And so I started giving diapering a try when I was in my very early 20s, and I have never walked away since.
Chloe and Benny are also representative of a pretty sizable demographic in the ABDL space, trans folks. For that community, there's a lot to like about age play. For one thing, diapers can be really freeing for people with gender dysphoria.
It removes like the genital region, like that stuff, all the dysphoria tied up in that, and just totally removes it from play.
It's a gender unifying garment.
And that can be really a boon.
Depending on how comfortable you are with your body and stuff.
But even more significantly, most trans folks didn't get a chance to have a childhood as their gender. And being able to relive that era, even a little bit, can be really therapeutic.
One is that I'm a transmasculine person, and I didn't get to have a boyhood. So getting to experience myself as an adult allows me to have a boyhood that I otherwise didn't have. And so my little self tends to lean in really hard on like very masculine childhood things in a very stereotypical way that isn't necessarily how I actually view the world as an adult, but is sort of the way a toddler might view gender. And it allows me to access sort of emotional intimacy and caregiving in a way that I think I did have as a kid, but many people just don't remember, right? So we get to bring that feeling of what we like want, that experience of feeling nurtured in that kind of way, and bring that into adulthood in a way that many people don't get. Well, once we're older than pretty small children.
However, it's not all smiles and sippy cups. Where there's shame for fun, there's often shame for real, and ABDL is no different. In fact, feeling ashamed for these interests is so common that there's almost a formula for how the struggle plays out: the binge purge cycle.
One thing that ABL individuals might experience as they grow up is the desire to be normal.
You realize life would just be so much easier if I didn't like this. If I didn't have an urge, an internal thing that I couldn't control. If I could just control it and make it go away, then my life would be so much better.
They might not realize that perhaps normal is only pretending to be what people define as normal. And try to quit cold turkey.
The amount of times I've thrown away everything I
me too.
own because I'm like, I'm not doing this, I'm done with this. You know?
They get rid of all their ABDL paraphernalia and try to oppose their practices. This comes with a lot of negative feelings because, well, they're trying to not be themselves. This puts them in a really bad place to change any practice.
And then you build impulses and desires because you're oppressing yourself, and then you binge again.
Those desires slowly build like water behind a dam until something finally breaks. Now, this break wouldn't be just an engagement in practices. It would be an extreme engagement of practices, complete immoderation. Something that they engage in sharply and then suddenly regret. This starts a cycle over again. They suddenly regret, they try to quit cold turkey, and the pressure starts building again.
That shame, that self-hatred, I think it really comes from societal expectations, right? Of what you should be, who you should be, what's normal, and a lack of understanding of why you feel that way and like why you have these urges, and a lack of empathy for yourself.
The best way to break out of the cycle is moderation. try to work out a moderate level of practice that you can stably be comfortable at. Depending on your life situation, you might be able to increase or decrease that to better comply with your living situations, your lifestyle. But it's important to gain that stability through moderation first. Otherwise, you'll just be going through a cycle of extreme trying to quit and extreme failing to quit, which gives rise to trying again and failing again.
A big part of this shame is a lack of understanding by friends and loved ones. Trusted confidants who spilled their deepest secrets, family members who teased and laughed at them, friends who turned it into a running joke. Part of the reason for this mini-series is to show that we're all human and that we all have reasons for liking the things we like. Understanding that is powerful. Ignorance actively harms people. If we're all more understanding of everyone else, there's a better chance they'll be understanding of us too.
I can say I have not had a binge purge cycle in probably close to like almost a decade. Not a decade yet, but like we're getting close to there. Like I am at a point where I love myself, I love who I am, I love what I do, I love the things I'm interested in, and I think anyone can get to that point, and I really hope like people maybe hear this and listen to this and think, oh, you know, I'm not there, so maybe I can get there and reach out for community, for like companionship and just understanding.
Thanks for listening. Thank you so much to Sophie and Chloe, Benny, and B. Terrance Grey for talking to me. Sophie and Chloe's podcast is The Usual Bet, and if you want a deeper dive into what ABDL is all about, I highly recommend episode 100. Kimmy is my favorite part. There is a link to their show in the show notes, or you can just search The Usual Bet wherever you found this podcast. B. Terrance Grey runs the website understandinginfantilism.org, where you can find both his research and the research of the late, great Brian Zamboni, who is responsible for the most significant research of the ABDL community in medical literature. Taboo Science is on YouTube. If you like consuming podcasts that way, click the link in the show notes and subscribe to the channel. At the moment I record this, I am 70 subscribers away from being monetized, which is a big deal. Your follow would be a big help. We have 2 episodes left in this mini-series. Next up is a kind of kink sampler platter before we hit the final boss kink. What's vor? Is financial domination a thing? What's up with wet and messy fetishes? I hope you'll tune in. I won't tell anyone.